They lied, they took us for a ride, tried burying the truth where it very nearly died. They lied, but no matter what they tried to hide, sing and shout, the truth wins out, everybody knows they lied. I ain't telling you nothing you don't already know, but the government's been lying to you, Joe. They're shaking your hand while showing you the door to a foreign land so you can fight the poor, where every Arab is a terrorist and they're hiding weapons that don't exist. You can join a coalition of willing nations, willing to kill civilians for the corporations. They lied, they took us for a ride, tried burying the truth where it very nearly died. They lied, but no matter what they tried to hide, sing and shout, the truth wins out, everybody knows they lie.
If you want to preserve your power indefinitely, you have to get the consent of the ruled. They will do it by bypassing the sort of rational side of man and appealing to his subconscious and his deeper emotions, and so making him actually love his slavery. I mean, I think this is the danger, that actually people may be in some ways happy under the new regime, but they will be happy in a situation where they oughtn't to be happy.
The nature of illusion is that it's designed, at least at the moment, to make you feel good about yourself, about your country, about where you're going. In that sense, it functions like a drug. Those who question that illusion are challenged not so much for the veracity of what they say, but for puncturing those feelings.
We maintain our strength in order to deter and defend against aggression, to preserve freedom and peace.
Our desire for peace.
The United States wants peace.
We seek peace. We strive for peace.
The people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
We're leaving behind a sovereign, stable, and self-reliant Iraq. Unlike the old empires, we don't make these sacrifices for territory or for resources. We do it because it's right.
Here's to the warmongers, the criminals, the liars, the psychopaths, the wolves in sheep's clothing, the ones who have no integrity. They're not fond of responsibility, and they have no respect for your rights.
The infiltration into the Americas by terrorists, by outside interference, and those who aren't just aiming at El Salvador, but I think are aiming at the whole of Central and possibly later South America, and I'm sure eventually North America.
The question is, why are we supporting El Salvador?
No, the question was, why are we killing priests in El Salvador?
The answer is we're not. Now you be quiet. President Cristiani is trying to do a job for democracy, and the left-wing guerrillas must not take over El Salvador.
I correct Mr. Secord that from December 1984 until July 1985, you were engaged in selling arms to the Contras for profit.
That's correct. I believe these hearings will be remembered longest, not for the facts they elicited, but for the extraordinary and extraordinarily frightening views of government they exposed. One vision was described in the testimony of Admiral Poindexter, Lieutenant Colonel North, General Secord, and Mr. Hakim, that of a secret government directed principally by NSC staffers accountable to not a single elected official, including apparently the President himself. A shadowy government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself.
To get Americans, perhaps any people, to support a war in a place millions barely heard of, certain buttons must be pressed.
They took the babies out of the incubators. Took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor.
Babies pulled from incubators and scattered like firewood across the floor.
And they had kids in incubators, and they were thrown out of the incubators so that Kuwait could be systematically dismantled.
Now is the time to check the aggression of this ruthless dictator whose troops have bayoneted pregnant women and have ripped babies from their incubators in Kuwait.
You went to investigate.
Yes, we did.
You went to Saudi,
Mm-hmm.
and then after the liberation of Kuwait, you went to Kuwait.
Correct.
Did Iraqi soldiers remove babies from incubators in order to steal the incubators?
No, they did not. Not at all.
An independent expose reveals how a British film crew photographed a Bosnian emergency shelter to look like a Nazi concentration camp. The film crew positioned themselves inside a barbed wire enclosure to shoot out at refugees, who were free to come and go as they pleased. The cameras zeroed in on a refugee whose emaciated appearance was the result of a birth defect.
We found that all of these allegations of a concentration camp were really frauds perpetrated by the reporters, and in fact, at least one, Roy Gutman, won a Pulitzer Prize for this kind of fabrication.
Cette couverture unilatérale, je crois que c'est le signe de l'influence des grandes agences de relations publiques, qui sont un phénomène nouveau dans le travail de l'information. On sait parfaitement maintenant que les Bosniaques musulmans et les Croates, ainsi que l'opposition musulmane du Kosovo, ont passé des contrats avec une agence américaine qui est à Washington, qui s'appelle Rutherford, et cette agence américaine a organisé une politique de relations publiques pour ses clients.
Chomsky, the American Chomsky, called that manufacturing consent, and that's, I believe, that's the goal of the media, manufacturing consent. Make the people approve the war, approve the international policy of the governments. Yes.
I just got this memo from the Secretary of Defense's office that says we're going to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years. We're going to start with Iraq, and then we're going to move to Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran.
Iraq, Saddam, find out, get back to me.
And the reaction you got that day from the Defense Secretary, Donald Rumsfeld, from his assistant, Paul Wolfowitz?
Well, Donald Rumsfeld said, when we talked about bombing the al-Qaeda infrastructure in Afghanistan, he said there were no good targets in Afghanistan. Let's bomb Iraq. And we said, but Iraq had nothing to do with this. And that didn't seem to make much difference.
The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa. We will bring to the Iraqi people food and medicines and supplies and freedom.
Sometimes the course of history poses challenges that threaten our common humanity and our common security. Some nations may be able to turn a blind eye to atrocities in other countries. The United States of America is different. And as president, I refuse to wait for the images of slaughter and mass graves before taking action.
Men, women, children lying in rows, killed by poison gas. Others foaming at the mouth, gasping for breath. A father clutching his dead children, imploring them to get up and walk.
Assad choked out the lives of helpless men, women, and children. It was a slow and brutal death for so many. Even beautiful babies were cruelly murdered in this very barbaric attack.
Yes, the coalition did hit people on Saturday. We did. A terrible accident.
If we want to really care about civil liberties in Syria, why don't we care about the secret prisons we have and the history of torture that we've had in this country? What about the fact that kill lists are being made by the executive branch of government, and we sit idly by and approve of it by saying nothing, and the American people put up with it, and we march in this direction, marching into a determination to have another war.
Remember when the United States and Russia were keen on sharing their friendship with the world?
Where's the vodka?
Pizza from the American delegation. This is from the Russian.
Well, it's certainly not like that these days.
America's experiment in democracy is going to be your worst day. Those were the words of the US Defense Secretary as he unveiled America's new defense strategy, which will now primarily focus on deterring Russia and China.
Those who would threaten America's experiment in democracy, they must know if you challenge us, it will be your longest and your worst day.
We have 3,000 U.S. troops deploying to Eastern Europe. Some armor will be going with them, apparently. To what effect, and what do you expect?
I think to no effect, Lou. It's game, set, and match in the Ukraine. The only way the United States can have any effect in this region and turn the tide is to start killing Russians by killing so many Russians that even Putin's media can't hide the fact that Russians are returning to the motherland in body bags.
Extremist groups will continue to exploit the vacuums that are there in Syria to expand their operations, which will include, no question, attacks against Russian interests, perhaps even Russian cities. And Russia will continue to send troops home in body bags.
The next shock group here is the fighting against the regional peer military powers. These are existential for us and our allies. The threat for this type of a fight is a nation state with modern capabilities, aggressive behavior, and engaging in militarized competition. So who would you pick for that one? I think it would be Russia.
I want to be clear to those who wish to do us harm. We'll stop you, and we will beat you harder than you've ever been beaten before.
So do you not understand how, or can you not even see how the Russians will perceive it as a threat, and the fact that it keeps getting closer to their border?
With regard to Russia, the myth that's being spun right now is that the United States has no blame for what Mr. Putin did with regard to Crimea and now writ larger Ukraine. No blame whatsoever, when the United States is almost completely, in a geostrategic sense, to blame. Let's just go back and let's do the history. As we were accomplishing, and I was in this administration too, H.W. Bush's administration, Bush 1 we call it, and during this time, we were negotiating the end of the Cold War. And what Jim Baker told Edward Shevardnadze, who was then the foreign minister for Gorbachev, was that NATO would not move 1 inch further to the east. Well, what did Bill Clinton do? He marched NATO all the way to Georgia and arguably Ukraine. So it's clear in geostrategic terms why Mr. Putin reacted. In the case of the United States right now, the media, such as it is corporate media. It's owned by corporations. And when you listen to the media, the mainstream media, what you're listening to, however subliminally some of it is corporations telling you, first, to buy their products, second, that they're innocent of any injustices, and that they're wonderful people and they're not really running our government, which in fact they are running our government.
They're saying that it's not even that the state controls the corporations that control the media. It's the corporations that control the state and the media.
Often, yeah, I'd say often in complicity with the state, when it's in their interest to be in complicity with the state. We are today a plutocracy. We are an oligarchy, of course, is a Greek term for a leadership that's composed of a select group of people, a select elite. Mm-hmm. A plutocracy is a unique oligarchy. It's where that select group of elite are the richest people. Mm-hmm. That's what we have in this country.
According to the mullahs in Tehran, we are the great Satan, lord of the underworld, master of the raging inferno. So I might imagine they would take me seriously that when I assure them today that if you cross us, our allies or our partners, if you harm our citizens, if you continue to lie, cheat, and deceive, yes, there will indeed be hell to pay.
You know, honestly, the people who know best what they need are the opposition figures inside Iran. If they're content to take American and other outside support, I think we should provide it to them.
Iran is the central banker of international terrorism, and I hope it's not going to take another 9/11 to wake us up.
We're fighting a forward strategy to
to prevent another 9/11 from happening over here.
We don't want to have another 9/11.
9/11 with weapons of mass destruction.
I think this bill would be better named if we called it Obsession with Iran Act 2012. Because this is what we continue to be doing, is obsessed with Iran and the idea that Iran is a threat to our national security. Iran happens to be a third world nation. They have no significant Navy, Air Force, intercontinental ballistic missiles. The IAEA and our CIA said they're not on the verge of a nuclear weapon. It's so similar to what we went through in the early part of this last decade when we were beating the war drums to go to war against Iraq. And it was all a facade. There was no danger from Iraq. So this is what we're doing, beating the war drums once again.
But, you know, the left right now blasting the president, saying his tough talk is, quote, reckless. It's bombastic, they say.
They will be met with fire, fury, and frankly power, the likes of which this world has never seen before.
I know I'm supposed to be freaking out because the North Koreans are about to test another missile, but have you ever seen a North Korean rocket test? They don't even look like real rockets. They look like that thing the Russian cosmonauts were in when they crashed onto Gilligan's Island. The only thing Kim Jong-un ever conquered is a box of donuts. I am not worried about him, but I do worry about America's military-industrial complex using any excuse to ramp up the war machine again.
What we're trying to describe here is that the United States has overwhelming military power that nobody in the world can stand up to. That's the message he's trying to do here.
Venezuela's foreign minister accused CNN of conducting a, quote, imperialistic media operation against her country.
Society collapses. America confronts the socialist dictatorship.
Maduro stole the previous election. He locked up and he tortured anyone trying to unseat him.
There's no toilet paper some days in Caracas. They're eating zoo animals. What happened? Well, you know what happened. They implemented socialism.
The eyes of the revolution are everywhere. President Maduro's militia still trying to keep the people in line.
Guaido is investing in the people, whereas Nicolas Maduro is investing in the army.
So this is a neighborhood Juan Guaido feels safe in. This is one of the wealthier neighborhoods of Caracas.
Would you personally negotiate with Nicolas Maduro to convince him to exit?
Well, he has requested a meeting, and I've turned it down because we're very far along in the process.
Maduro's loyalists turned on their own people. As the world watched, they set fire to trucks loaded with food and medicine desperately needed by the Venezuelan people.
Every time the U.S. wants to start a new war, it does it the same way, which is it invents some really inflammatory, emotionally wrenching lie that gets people to hate the government they want to topple so much that they set their rationality aside and support the war. So they claim North Korea or North Vietnam attacked U.S. ships in the Gulf of Tonkin, which was a lie to start the Vietnam War. They claim that Saddam had been ripping babies out of incubators in Kuwait to start the Gulf War, which was a lie. They claimed weapons of mass destruction, which was a lie to start the Iraq War. And now you have Marco Rubio and John Bolton and Elliot Abrams, the crew, the neocon crew, who are experts at lying to start wars, going around telling lies about what the Maduro government is doing. And regardless of what you think about the Maduro government or President Maduro himself, you should be highly angry when your own government, with the help of its media, lies to you in order to start a war. And this incident on February 23rd was incredibly important because that imagery of burning humanitarian trucks was very powerful. And the claim that it was Maduro's forces that did it came not just from Marco Rubio, who cited anti-Maduro media outlets with no evidence. CNN lied to the world. They claimed that their own journalists witnessed with their own eyes Maduro's forces throwing incendiary devices that set those trucks on fire. Right away, independent journalists, including Max Blumenthal, as well as Dan Cohen, who works at RT, looked at and studied, they were in Venezuela, the available footage, and said that it was clear that it was the anti-Maduro protesters who set those trucks on fire. But those people were ignored by the corporate media in the United States, which only paid attention to the people who were lying on behalf of the U.S. government, only aired the lies that it was the Maduro forces who did it. And then suddenly the New York Times comes out with a good expose that proves that it was a lie. They didn't bother to credit any of the independent journalists who did it 2 weeks ago using much of the same evidence, but they did show that it was a lie.
What about the policy of assassination and assassinating American citizens? What about arrest by the military, National Defense Authorization Act? What about the drone warfare that we go on? Do you think we're protecting civil liberties by arbitrarily dropping drones or threatening to drop drones any place in the world with innocent people dying?
So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. One can combine other means of pressure with sanctions. I mentioned that explosion on August 17th. We could step up the pressure. I mean, look, people, Iranian submarines periodically go down. Someday one of them might not come up. Who would know why? We are in the game of using covert means against the Iranians. We could get nastier at that.
Unfortunately, you've grown up hearing voices that incessantly warn of government as nothing more than some separate, sinister entity that's at the root of all our problems. They'll warn that tyranny is always lurking just around the corner. You should reject these voices.
My team and my specialties, information operations and the psychological arm of things, we are trained to deceive if we have to.
If you found out that your public affairs team that was showing you around actually had just completed a 40-hour course in psychological operations and was trained in psyops and in military deception, you start to question, hey, is that an appropriate use of that resource?
Billions of people are sick and tired of the endless wars, the poverty that is coming, the attacks of our civil liberties.
What is fake news?
It is whatever power doesn't like.
The people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago.
Our careful planning essentially discarded.
There wasn't enough time, but maybe for the next war.
There are nights when I don't sleep very well.
In the world we have entered, the only path to safety is the path of action, and this nation will act.
So let me say it clearly. The United States can, must, and will lead in this new century.
People don't recognize that Hezbollah has active cells. The Iranians are impacting the people of Venezuela. We have an obligation to take down that risk for America.
All options are on the table.
All options are on the table.
All options are on the table.
The United States now looks forward to watching each corner of the triangle fall, in Havana, in Caracas, in Managua.
The days of socialism and communism are numbered.
Libertad, libertad, libertad.
What right have you, when I mean you, the CIA, the United States government, or any foreign power, what right do you have to do what you do in other countries?
National security interests.
But that's a divine right, isn't it? Because the people that you do it to have no say in this.
Yeah, well, that's just tough. We'll intervene whenever we decide it's in our national security interest to intervene. And if you don't like it, lump it. Get used to it, world.
Tonight is the night that you give up your rights to the Patriot Act and the perilous fight, but you won't remember which country you're in when you wake up in the morning by the dawn's early light. If it reminds you of the Third Reich, you better keep quiet. If you don't like it, better watch your backs, cover your tracks, cause you're paying for it all with your federal tax. They lied, they took us for a ride, tried burying the truth where it very nearly died. They lied, but no matter what they tried, hide. Sing and shout, the truth wins out. Everybody knows they lie.
When I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.
Blow up Afghanistan, nuke Iraq. We got the biggest phasers on the block. We're the world's policemen around the clock. You got the calm now, Mr. Spock. To the victors go the spoils. The lithium crystals, petroleum oil. They hate our freedom for no good reason. Arabs and Klingons, it's open season. They lied, they took us for a ride. Tried burying the truth where it very nearly died. They lied, lied, but no matter what they tried to hide, sing and shout, the truth wins out. Everybody knows they lie. So you know that the government's been lying to you, and I know that you know that it ain't nothing new. That's politicians, that's what they do. They've been lying since 1492. They didn't teach me when I was a kid about all the terrible things that we did. We'll always honor this sacred treaty with a smallpox-covered blanket, sweetie. Agent Orange and Napalm, Gulf of Tonkin, Vietnam, Iran-Contra, Watergate. It's a history of the criminal state. We're spoon-feeding it right out of the box. We're fair and balanced, says the fox, while talk show shills are shouting out, it's the liberals we gotta be worrying about. They lied, they took us for a ride, tried burying the truth where it very nearly died. They lied, but no matter what they tried to hide, sing and shout, the truth wins out. Everybody knows they lie.
Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me, you can't get fooled again.